Now I have to start off by saying that the majority of this video was made just before the reveal of Yin, the second melee carry. As a result, I will not mention her anymore beyond this point. Without further ado, let's begin, shall we? I love Grim, but he sucks. And before we get into the nitty-gritty, I want people to understand why I consider him to be my favorite marauder. Also, for the record, I won't be talking much about Sereth, as I think she's more of an assassin than a carry, but that's a subject for another video. For now, we'll stick with the 4 ranged marauders. Speaking of which, you have your choice between Unmasked Reaper, Forest Ash, and slower Doom Guy. And then there's this thing. And before you comment below, I'm not saying that Epic ripped off other games. What I am saying is that Grim is by far the most unique and creative out of the whole bunch. One of the things I love most about Paragon is its refusal to choose between sci-fi and fantasy. We have fairies that make plants grow versus legitimate boxing robots, cyborgs made out of flesh and metal versus knights in shining armor, guns and energy grenades versus freaking ghosts. Grim is the only character as of yet to be a perfect example of this uniquely Paragon trait. Grim by himself appears to be some sort of weird fairy, while his robot.exe, which I'll refer to as X, is powered by a generator that Grim turns, sending energy straight into his system. Grim.exe is therefore 2 characters in one. And unlike Iggy and Scorch, the 2 represent each side at first glance, making the impression of a sci-fi fantasy fusion immediately. His kit is also very interesting for a quote-unquote carry. He's much more defensive focused, without many offensive tools to use. Since I've always preferred playing frontliners and MOBAs, his kit meshed well with my playstyle. At least on Legacy. Speaking of his kit, that's where the problems begin to arise. If you go over here to the Paragon wiki, you will see the stats for every character. And as we know, the core of every carry is their auto attacks, so let's compare those first. Sparrow has a base damage of 50, up to 64 level 15. Likewise, Twin Blast also has a base damage of 50, up to 68.2 at level 15. Murdoch has a base damage of 58 to a whopping 86 at level 15. While Grim has a base damage of 55 and goes up to 77.4 at level 15. Now here's the damage of a single auto attack at 100 power, level 15 with no crit. At first it doesn't seem too bad, right? No more than 20 or so damage difference. But Grim's kit puts him at a disadvantage. Sparrow is practically matched in damage through scaling and level, but her E passive grants a percentage damage increase, at level 15 being a whole 40% at max 5 stacks. This makes her damage 229.6. Murdoch is able to shred 20 basic armor with his Q, further increasing his damage. Using a new formula that took me a while to find, we can calculate what this can do to someone with 50 armor. Before the shred, you have 33% damage reduction. After the shred, you have 23% damage reduction. So the total ends up being 143.25 damage after mitigations, an increase of 18.63 damage, or an increase of about 15%. Twin Blast has no such buff other than his right click, letting him shoot 3 times in succession. Assuming all shots land, at level 15 you're looking at 3 shots doing 45% damage, adding up to a total of 135%, or about 200.07 damage. And that's all in the same time that it takes to make a standard shot, not even taking into account that each shot can crit individually. Grim, on the other hand, has no ability that buffs his damage in any way. Even Sereth, at least, has an ultimate that causes increased damage to burning targets. We could look at the numbers all day, but let's compare in game, shall we? What you're seeing here is a side-by-side comparison of all the Marauders versus a single Raptor with no cards at level 15, and using only auto attacks. Unfortunately, Sereth just barely didn't make it. All the more reason to leave her out of the discussion for now. The results are as expected. The base damage directly correlates with how long it takes to kill the raptor, with the only exception being Sparrow's first place victory, which is a direct result of her passive. So at the very least, we know that the numbers are in fact correct. If Twin Blast and Murdoch had used their abilities I mentioned earlier, then they would have left Grim in the dust. It seems as though Epic made Grim have a reduced damage for the sake of diversifying the numbers a bit. I also need to add that Grim is by far the most in danger of being hit due to his size. Grim suffers from the crunch effect, of having a model that's too big for what's appropriate and his squishy stats that leave him at a disadvantage. So how do we buff him? Well, there's the easy option of just buffing his damage, which could cover the DPS gap between him and the other marauders. Being that he has very few forms of damage in his kit, his autos need to do more damage in order to catch up with the others. But I think there's other ways to buff him, ways that will make him stand out much more. When looking at his basic abilities, I still get the idea that Grim can break the mold of carries quite a bit. Imagine, if you will, a frontline carry. It sounds like an oxymoron, of course, and most people will begin to have a stroke over the idea of a ranger not being a glass cannon carry, but let me explain. Grim's abilities can allow him to be in the front line with the help of lifesteal, and his autos can allow him to do sustained damage through crit and or pen. That is, of course, if pen was useful, which is a topic for another time. His slowing and displacing make him ideal to catch someone out so that the team can collapse on them. And the point of his shield is to absorb abilities, which is something frontliners do all the time. So this is what I propose. What if instead of making Grim more like the other three marauders, why don't we double down on his kit's efficiency? His damage could possibly take a small nerf to implement these ideas. That is, of course, if it's really necessary. But first, let's talk about his shield. What if we remove the mana refund, or at least dramatically reduce it, and have the shield persist for the duration and not be deactivated by a single spell? With so many damage over time abilities in the game, I think this change could make him very useful to counter casters like Gadget, Faye, Howitzer, and Gideon. Otherwise, they counter Grim with a spell that does tick damage, immediately knocking out his shield before the heavy hits land their mark. And what if we added a short stun to suppression mode after a given number of shots on the target? Perhaps something like 5 or so shots. This will greatly increase the skill's usefulness in chasing and in peel, as well as motivate the player to land their shots more accurately. And maybe we could make his ultimate not stop him in his tracks? I compared Grim's ultimate to Murdoch's. Murdoch's ult has an unlimited range, does not require vision or lock-on, ignores ability armor, has a shorter cooldown for the first 2 levels, can hit multiple targets, can hit towers, core, and OP. As you can see here, it's also faster to activate and hit. Not to mention you're just begging to get yourself killed for how long it takes to channel and for what little damage it does, even with energy pen. So for his ult, either his damage needs to be increased, or casting it should be much easier. A shorter channel and ability to aim through walls with player vision might be very useful and put him more in line with Murdoch. His displacement bomb can be changed in a few ways. As it is now, it has a large margin of error, and many times pushes enemies in ways you don't intend. What if instead of pushing away, it knocks enemies up? As far as I can tell, this could be a fantastic initiation tool. The bomb can also be tweaked to have a faster travel speed, or more of a straight line instead of an arc. Or maybe pull enemies towards the center instead of outwards. If we combine these ideas, we can get the Grim that I want to see come to fruition. As a frontline marauder, you can pick off a target with a short knockup, followed up by a suppression mode to keep them close enough to deal consistent, albeit not massive, damage. When they retaliate with spells, use your shield to power through their counter initiation, giving you the ability to stay in range until they can take an ult to the face. With this kit, I expect to see an increase to his skill cap. If you waste your knockup on a tank, the rest of his team can turn on you quite quickly. The enemy can also bait out the shield. Once it's down, he becomes more of a target. You also have to make sure to land all of your shots if you want that stun to proc. Actually, if the numbers are worked correctly, this can make Grim fall into the assassin trait, as he is all about eliminating targets one at a time. Of course, these are just my ideas, but if someone at Epic sees this and takes my thoughts into account, that would be greatly appreciated. I want to see Grim become more viable and successful, as well as the game as a whole. So as there continues to be a need for ideas on balance changes, I'll be here to add more. If you have any unique ideas on how to buff Grim, feel free to leave it in the comments. Also, a quick shout out to my teammates, Wonky, Thyston, Prophet, and Smoothie, for taking the time to help me film the comparison shots. My name is Aeon, thanks for watching.